and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some NuclearRevenge. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you leave, just remember, I know a lot about revenge. Just kidding. Alright, our first story today comes to us from HuntingTheWumpus. They screwed me out of my pay, I screwed them out of their company. Let's jump right in. Many years ago, I got a job with a marketing company during phone deregulation. It was the Wild West and a lot of small long-distance companies sprang up, all trying to get a piece of the pie. Eventually, they all got bought up by the bigger fish, but at that time, they were all paying hired gun marketing firms very well to score contracts for them to lock people in. I got a job with one of those marketing firms, a new age capitalism company that insisted we all do yoga and breathing exercises while they rang a little bell and gave us affirmations about how many contracts we were all going to sell and how much money we'd all make. The job was 100% commission, but I was always good at sales, so I looked at the pay scale and noticed that it was exponential, presumably to entice people to work hard with impossible payouts. We were allowed to work as many or as few hours as we wanted, with the payout based on your weekly sales numbers. I decided I would give it a shot for 1 week to see how much I could realistically make before deciding whether I was willing to put up with the tasteless vegan snacks and mandatory voluntary yoga regime. For the next week, I pushed myself as hard as I could. For 7 straight days, I worked 14+ hour days every single day and used every trick and technique I had learned doing sales to score as many contracts as I possibly could. I figured this would tell me my maximum possible income and could decide on that basis whether to stay. At the end of the week, I had blown everyone else out of the water. In fact, I had not just gotten more contracts than anyone there had ever seen in a week, I had gotten more than any of them had seen in a month. Because of the exponential scale, I realized that I was making absolutely ridiculous amounts of money, $10,000 plus a week. They had never experienced anyone who could actually hit those kinds of numbers. Coming in the next week, expecting a huge payday, I ended up with about 5% of what I expected. They told me there were problems with a lot of my contracts, and that I would be allowed to fix them and submit them a few at a time over the next several weeks. These problems were things like an apostrophe wasn't quite clear, or the dash in someone's phone number was slightly crooked. They were going to screw me. That night, I got a phone call from the company's office manager, Frank, who wanted to meet up for a drink. Curious, I agreed. Over beers, Frank told me that the owners of the company were in a panic because I would have bankrupted them. He said they spread out all my contracts on the floor of the office, then they crawled over them, inspecting each one and trying to figure out if I was committing some kind of fraud. When they comprehended that all my contracts were legit, they decided they had no choice but to screw me over. Frank told me he realized at that point that if they would screw me, they'd screw him too. And besides, he was tired of doing yoga. He asked me if I would be interested in going into business with him and go head to head with his bosses. I thought it sounded intriguing, but I asked him how he thought we could compete. Frank explained that he had found out they didn't actually have the contract for our city. They were acting as independent contractors for another company who had the contract to market the service in an entirely different city. They were poaching here because the person who did have the contract wasn't actively using it. We put together a pitch and approached the guy with the real contract, Joe, and told him about the people poaching his turf. We agreed that we'd split it with him. We'd take the upfront money for each contract and he'd get the back-end money down the road. It was a good deal for everyone. So Joe contacted the phone company and had them threaten the poachers with a big lawsuit if they didn't stop. A week later, Frank and I strolled into the offices of our old employer. Most of the furniture and all of the yoga mats were gone, and there was just a table, a couple of filing cabinets, and a file box with the final pay envelopes for everyone. I made a show of counting my money to make sure it was all there, and the two owners, husband and wife, told Frank and I bitterly that they'd had to take cash advances on their credit cards for this money, and asked me if I felt guilty for destroying their lives. I smiled, said nope, and left. Our marketing company made us a lot of money over the year until the company got bought up by Sprint and the gravy train ended. Ah yes, corporate jargon, mandatory voluntary, otherwise known as voluntold or recommendatory. Down in the comment section for this one, there's one from a user called Tasharella. It says, "Why wouldn't you sue them for the $10,000? It seems like you had a very solid case and you would have been able to get a no-win, no-fee for that. As in, sue them for the stolen wages as well as destroying their company. You absolutely could have done that. Why didn't you?" OP responded to this one and said, "I was an independent contractor. That's the only way they could get away with paying only on commission. There was also the problem that out of spite, they stole all those contracts. I still had the contact information so I could go back and get the forms re-signed from the customers, but I had no real evidence it happened. And I certainly wasn't going to spend thousands on a lawyer to sue people who were running a business on credit card cash advances and were probably close to broke anyway." I'd say in this case, OP did a pretty darn good job of getting revenge anyway. In fact, I think OP got really lucky that the office manager wanted to screw the company too. Our next story today comes to us from Top Professional 69. "My boss suspended me for his negligence, so I ruined his life." Let's jump right in. For a little context, I work at a vape shop which is already in a rough space due to regulations and laws the government is putting on us. Due to this, we were well aware that certain products we sold and made were highly illegal and enforceable at any time. I, 25 male, have been working at my job for a little over a year and a half. The owner of the company is the one who hired me, and she was the biggest sweetheart in the world. Unfortunately, she was forced out of her company by her son. He is the type of person who believes that he is always right, and if you don't agree with him, he will completely ignore you or fire you. He literally forced his mom into retirement by threatening to, hurt himself, and continues to use that card every time she even says she wants to come visit. Last winter, we had a massive snowstorm. Getting to work was rough, but we were told that we had to come anyway. We get there and the snow isn't plowed from the parking lot because he didn't want to pay the guy to do it, so we had to. Due to the lot being absolutely massive, we couldn't get it all done in time for us to help customers. As they came and went, we noticed the snow being patted down to the ground and essentially turning into a slip and slide. Of course, he didn't do anything about it and asked me and another coworker to clear all the garbage out of the other side of the building. When I did, I slipped and hurt myself. I didn't file for workers' comp, but told them I'd need to rest myself while at work. The next shift, I sat almost the entire shift, and because I couldn't do anything, I sat on my phone, only to get up to help customers. The next day, my manager tells me he got out of a meeting with the owner's son, and I was suspended for a week, 5 shifts. As I'm a college student and rent an apartment and have car payments, I couldn't afford to lose 5 days of pay. I marched into his office and laid it out that either he fires me so I can collect unemployment or unsuspend me. He told me that neither was happening and that he was going to use me as an example to the rest of the employees. I was pissed and cursed him out. He doesn't like confrontation, so he shortened my suspension to get me out of the office. He then treated me poorly and singled me out for everything everyone else also does. But I was the only one being punished. Then comes the fact that he wanted to reconcile by forcing me to do handyman work around the place and didn't give me the tools, equipment, or training to do or use any of these objectives. This was the tipping point for me. The revenge. Due to being constantly singled out, I came to learn that everyone else was unhappy with this fact. I learned all the dirty little secrets about the company, including illegal products, labor violations, tax violations, etc. I used these secrets that I learned to call multiple government agencies, FDA, OSHA, DOL, and report him by name. First, OSHA came and did an inspection on my day off. He told everyone they only cited him for a small violation, and he was good other than that. I was obviously angry at that, but a few weeks later, I got a packet in the mail telling me he got cited for everything and he was getting massive fines. I then get called into the office again with the manager who told me I was suspended. He proceeded to tell my manager that he was getting demoted for not writing me up more and that I was no longer getting my raise until I fixed my attitude. This, of course, was right after he said, "I don't care that you called OSHA." This little act is known as retaliation, which is illegal to do to people who called a protected agency like OSHA. He refused to even look at me at this point because if he did anything, that would imply he was punishing me for calling OSHA. I would have a lawsuit to destroy him. Now to today, another day off for me, and I get a text from a coworker at 11 a.m. That message was, FDA is here, the manager quit and it's crazy. The FDA and IRS came rolling in full force in black trucks and SUVs. They came in and raided the place, seizing all illegal products and all the paperwork pertaining to the business. They're still there as I write this, so hopefully there will be more to come, but knowing how this works out in most cases, I won't have a job much longer and will be on unemployment. OP added an edit on at the bottom of the story. It says, the ATF also showed up. They confiscated all the house-made juices. We apparently don't have a manufacturing license. None of us knew this, and that means we may no longer be able to sell products. The IRS showed up because there's a possible case for an investigation into tax evasion. As I learn more, I will continue to update. And update OP did. We have update number 2. It says, it seems as though through talks with the lawyer, the son decided to actually take the heat for all of it and is going to have to pay massive fines and is possibly looking at jail time. He likely won't ever be able to get a manufacturing license for the rest of his life, and they said essentially that he won't be able to open any new businesses. I know he had 2 new locations rented out and in the process of opening, and those are never going to happen now. They're raiding his other business today, and that's going to be interesting, considering that if he doesn't have the paperwork for that business, it could lead to much more jail time. So as of right now, even though my job isn't shutting down yet, his other business is getting raided. He can't open the 2 locations that he's put a crap ton of money and time into, and he's going to be fined all he's worth and possibly go to jail. I will continue to update. Down in the comment section for this one, there was some really solid advice for OP from a user called Burnt Jelly Toast. In the future, always write up an incident report if you get injured at work. Even if it's minor at the time, the injury can get worse in the following days. It protects both you and the company. OP responded to this one and said there was an incident report. The injury wasn't that large, just required me to sit down for a few shifts, so I didn't apply for workers' comp. Another user called Script responded to this and said, always let a doctor decide that. Never assume anything when it comes to work injuries. This is so true. Get everything documented as much as you can, even go and see a doctor in that case, even if you're not feeling all that bad. I mean, you were bad enough that you needed light duties for a few shifts. That means you should go see the doctor, because you never know what's going to come up in the future. Having that doctor visit on your record and the reasoning for that visit could mean the difference in the future of having a claim versus not having a claim. Also, OP, make sure you follow up with the IRS because they generally do have a whistleblower fee that they pay out, which is typically around 10% of whatever they collect back from the person that was being dishonest on their taxes. It sounds to me from what you said that you're living paycheck to paycheck, so that's something you might really want to follow up on. Our last story today comes to us from Leading Road 8119. Bully tries to act like it was in school? Guess I will tell on you then. Let's jump right in. In secondary school, I was tormented by a specific bully. For years, I was beaten up and publicly humiliated on a daily basis. The worst thing he did was beat me up so bad that I got a concussion and broken ribs when I was 14. He never faced consequences in school because his family was rich, and he was pretty popular. For context, I live in a pretty small town in England, so everyone knows everyone, including the bully. He left school when I was 17, and I didn't see him for about a year. Around this time, I got way more popular and started going to parties and making more friends. And annoyingly, he was friends with some of my friends, and his girlfriend was at my school. But I managed to avoid him mostly until I finished school. Unfortunately, I saw him a few months later. Me and my friends went to the pub to celebrate our exam results, and he was a complete butthole to me. Started insulting me and mocking me to my friends, saying, "Why do you hang out with OP?" Bringing up a bunch of stuff from years ago, and at one point put me in a headlock and told me that my friends only hung out with me out of pity. I wasn't going to take it, but I also wasn't going to get into a punch-up because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of getting me angry. And right at that moment, I overheard the perfect thing. He was bragging to his friends about the house party he was having and saying about all the illicit substances he was going to take to the party, and said he had it all in his car. It wasn't just a bit of green either, if I remember correctly. He said he had 13 bags of sugar and a bunch of other substances. And then I knew what I would do for my revenge on the guy. As he was leaving, I followed him to his car and took a photo of his number plate. Then, after he was driving off, I walked off and called the police. I knew they needed something more than hearsay to stop the car, especially because I didn't want to be traced back to it. So I told the police I saw my bully doing a white powder in the pub toilets. This was a complete fabrication, and then get into the driver's side of the car. I then provided them with the license plate of the car and told them the direction they were heading in. I honestly didn't think they were going to stop him, or maybe they would ask him questions later and ruin his party, but the driving on illicit substances allegation plus the fact he had been arrested for minor possession before, which I didn't know at the time, was enough for the police to take it seriously and stop and search his car. And they found all the illicit substances he was transporting to his party, and he got arrested for it. The consequences of his arrest meant he lost out on his university place. His rich parents had enough of his behavior, so kicked him out and cut him off from their funds. And a rumor I heard was that in turn for a lower sentence, my bully ratted out his supplier, which resulted in him getting hurt. And as a consequence of that, now has to wear a colostomy bag, and his criminal record means he is currently unemployed. OP, I can tell you from personal experience, it takes a really long time to get over being bullied when you're younger. I still have some issues with it, and I'm 41. One thing you have that I don't though is that you know that your bully got what was coming to him, because your bully was a total shitbag, both inside and out. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.